As you might have already guessed, the origin of the term ghost ship has very little to do with ghost. It was used to refer to ships found at sea without crews. In the early ages of maritime travel, it wasn't unheard of to find a derelict whose crew was washed out by sea, by a savage storm, or ravaged by the plague. In the mind of the superstitious mariner, this suggested all sorts of outrageous stories. Tales of the seafaring monsters and sirens luring unfortunate sailors to their doom were all too prevalent, overshadowing the more likely causes of piracy and sickness. I don't doubt the spreading of such ridiculous tales was due in part by those who wished to scare others off of the lucrative field of maritime salvage. Even a small ship could net a lucky crew a tidy sum, not including the boat's cargo. Knowing this, how could these silly stories of haunted boats and their spectral crews sound like nothing more than a clumsy attempt to keep you from a fair reward? I could never believe in those sort of stories. I knew that those were kind of meant for children, and not a rational person, like a true sailor should be. But they did interest me. It was fascinating to hear what wicked tales some fanciful mind had cooked up, and decided just what could have really happened. I never liked the retelling of such folk tales, for the spread of these stories only served to make crews more skittish. I love to dissect them, and understand what makes us such a superstitious lot. I thought I understood the mind of my fellow sailor, all the intricate little beliefs and fears that made us human. All it took was one simple story to make me realize my own arrogance. I'm going to break one of my own rules by telling it to you, but try to understand. This is more for your benefit than mine. Take from it what you will, but don't think for a moment that I'm just trying to frighten you with silly ghost stories. It doesn't matter whether or not this tale is real, just that you understand the underlying message. There was once a young man who had grown up in poverty and wanted nothing more than to escape his hard life on land for a more adventurous one at sea. At the age of 16, he ran away and joined a crew of tramp steamers out of New York. Of course, he had to lie about his age, but the captain understood his situation. It was a harsh adjustment for the boy, but he managed admirably. The shifting waves of the open ocean are far less hospitable to the man's stomach than the solid ground of land. As the newest crew member, he had great many things to prove, and the best way to prove them was to take any and every job asked of him. Unfortunately, these jobs were always the least desirable ones, often tedious and sometimes dangerous. The boy willingly accepted any challenge offered to him. I don't mean to say he didn't enjoy his work. Being worked to the bone afforded him little time for himself, and night watch on the deck gave him ample time for that. He'd often find himself lost in thought as he paced around the deck, staring out over the inking black waters. There was never anything to see upon the lapping waves but darkness. It made him feel as if nothing existed beyond what he could see in the ship's running lights. It was on one such night that the boy found it. He actually heard it before he saw it. The sound mingled with the crash of the waves against the hull, giving it a strange musical tone. It was like the stretching of metal upon metal, but conducted by an orchestra. A strange and lonely yearning call, or so thought the fanciful mind of the boy, not yet a man. In the direction of the sound he could see the faint lights in the distance. Though it hadn't been foggy that night, the water particles in the air made the light look gaseous and unnatural. As you can imagine, the boy's fancy was excited by the sight. Though he didn't believe in ghosts or monsters at sea, he was by no means curious. As the ships neared the light, the boy saw that he wasn't looking at its first spirit, but the running lights of a boat slightly larger than his own. Rocking perilously at the mercy of the waves, he couldn't see a single soul on deck. Its surface was covered in rust and detritus left from the waves above the deck line. As it bobbed up and down upon the unforgiving sea, the boy realized the cracking hull of the derelict was causing the strange musical notes. From just a single sight of the thing, he knew something was very wrong. His call for alarm was drawn by the attention of not only the crew still awake, but half those sleeping. Within a minute's time, over 20 men, including the captain and the first mate, stood staring at the lifeless ship bob upon the waves. Amidst the flurry of excited discussion, the boy caught words like survivors and salvage, but he could not tear his eyes away from the thing. It moved almost hypnotically on the ocean, and the cracking musical notes began to develop a haunting, ominous quality. He thought it was almost pleading. When the boy mentioned it to the other men, no one paid any attention. It did not take long to pull the ship up beside the derelict and lash the two together with rope and whatever boarding hooks they could find. The abandoned ship seemed undamaged for the most part and had no trouble floating. Being the one who had first spotted the vessel, the boy's captain eagerly volunteered him for the first party to board it. He was understandably nervous about setting foot on the ship, but the duty was clear. 10 men armed with flashlights flooded the empty deck in search of survivors. The boy stuck to the protective side of his captain, though outwardly he tried to put on his tough face. As much as he hoped to find anyone alive, the searching party found no one. Oh, they found plenty of signs of life, but not one's living soul. Clothes left, those on bunkers they had been changed and tossed aside in a hurry. Food left half-eaten in the gallery to collect mold. He'd even spotted a few mousetraps and droppings, but not one furry little stowaway could be located. The boat's swing suspected the crew had abandoned the ship due to fear of disease or piracy, but they found no lifeboats missing. Other theories floated around the crew as they searched, but the boy noticed that no one seemed worried about the state of the ship or the mounting intensity of the musical cracking. After finding nothing in the crew's quarters and officially deciding that their expedition was no longer a rescue but salvage, they moved greedily to the hold. Though it was damp, the cargo seemed mostly intact. The boy did not know what most of it was, but the captain seemed quite excited by their find. The rest of the searchers seemed pleased and completely obvious to the booming metallic scraping that echoed in the ear since he had stepped onto the damned ship. It had never been this loud. There was no doubt in his mind that the musical cracking came from here, the belly of the ship. The boy had to slap his hands to his ears to shut it out. "Why can't you hear it?" he bellowed as he sunk to the floor. "Don't you see it's not safe here?" But no one listened to him. They were all old veterans of the sea. They did not fear the old tales, nor did they fear the rantings of a child pretending to be a man. He yelled and grew violent in his attempt to make the sailors leave. When they tried to lay hands on him, the boy threw savage punches at his assailants. It took 5 men to wrestle him down to the ground and drag him back to their ship. Once there, the boy was thrown into a cell. The captain left him with a sad look on his face, placing the keys to his prison quite visibly on the table in plain view. There he stayed for the next 2 days in the blinding agony with the musical screeching deafening him. On the dawn of the 3rd day, the boy awoke to find the sound faded from what he had assumed was distance. Had the crew listened to him and abandoned their derelict after all? As the day dragged on, the musical calling continued to fade until he was left with the silence of his own ship. Silence. No hum, no motors or clomping footsteps, no voices. No one had come to give him his meals. His stomach twisted painfully as the implications ran through his mind. He had to get out. The flimsy frame of the cell's bed came apart easily, offering up a straight metal pole long enough to hook the table legs. Within minutes, he'd pulled it close enough to grab the cell cleats off the surface and throw open his cage. However, the joy of freedom was overshadowed by his growing sense of dread. There was nothing but the echoing sound of groaning metal to greet him. The boy found his ship in a state much like he'd expected. No signs of struggle, but not a single sailor on board but himself. Just like the derelict, food had been left partially consumed and clothes left on the floor, and bunkers as if forgotten. What little he knew of the operation of the ship, he could tell the engines and boiler had been left idle, and eventually die from lack of attention. It was as if his entire crew had dropped everything they were doing and left without a word. 47 men had disappeared and left no trace. The worst of it all was that the derelict he'd been so rationally frightened had gone. In the yellowing evening light, he could see for miles in all directions, but there was nothing he could see, just more ocean. The boy felt oppressively alone in his empty ship on a cold, uncaring sea. Where had they all gone? Did they take the derelict? But why did they leave him here alone? Was his offense enough that the captain would doom him to death at sea? The boy struggled to find a rational explanation for everything, but rationality was in short supply. Every time he tried to think, the creaking medical beckoning would play in his head and cloud his mind. As you can imagine, attempting to run a streamer that is required of a crew of at least 20 by yourself would be an impossible task, but he tried. It was more or less just to pass the time until his possible rescue and keep his mind from wandering to less productive thoughts. The radio did not reach far enough to effect a rescue, and he had no idea how he would tell anyone where he was anyways. All he could do was to tend the ship and hope, but really, it wouldn't matter in the end. As the days came and went, the waves crashing against the hull began to give him nightmares. It was the music of the sea, the increasing drumming of the waves, the piping groan of the hull and the protest, the sad lonely song of the wind. It all sounded so familiar to him, as if he had realized why. The song had begun to invade his waking world. The lonely beckoning song of the derelict, but this time he heard it from the beginning, and coming from his ship. It wasn't fear that made him turn off the ship's running lights and destroy its beacon. It wasn't fear that drove him to pile as much food and fresh water as he could comfortably to fit into his own cell, lock himself in and throw the keys over the deck. It was resignation. So now you understand why I can't open the store and why I couldn't tell your captain what happened to the rest of the crew. If I seem calm, it's only because I know there's no helping what will become of me. You've heard the song. You know I have. I can see it in your eyes. You've all heard her lonely call, whether they realize it or not. But I can tell you, you will understand. If you truly want to know what happened to my fellows, then by all means stay. I suspect I shall join them soon. I have no doubt you'll never hear word from my derelict or my crew again, and anyone who stays on this vessel will likely disappear as well. Laugh if you like. Call this a silly ghost story. It doesn't matter in the end. But if you want to avoid my fate, then you and your mates need to leave this damn ship. You're probably wondering what brought this curse upon our heads. I did. Was it something in the hold of the devil's derelict? Was it something in the air? Or was it really a ghost? Ravenous for the souls of the living. Like I said, I don't know myself, but I have my suspicions. I'm sure you do as well. The superstitions of the past aren't lost on me now, and I wonder if the old beliefs that a boat without a crew cries out in pain, in loneliness. You can hear it now, too, can't you? The song. It's the call of the one of the true siren. A ship with no crew is no ship at all.
You can see him, just standing there. You can smell him, that putrid rotting flesh. The darkness does little to conceal him and only makes the sight more frightening. You want nothing more than to crawl into your bed and forget the haunted sight. You wonder why he chose to stand there night after night. Nothing ever seems to change. Every night you hear him creep closer. You hear his footsteps first in the distance, and then outside your door. The acrid stench of long decaying flesh wafts in from underneath and threatens to choke you with every breath. You want to scream, but you hold it back out of fear of him hearing you. But you know it's pointless. He knows you are there, and you know that he knows it. That's part of what's been driving you mad. He knows that you know as well and is content to let you wallow in your fear. You wonder what you did to deserve his terrifying presence. Was it that you murdered your mother? Surely not. That bitch deserved to die. Was it that time you refused to help that dying woman? No. She was old and bound to die anyway. Could it have been that you turned your back on your own daughter and did nothing while her attackers did as they pleased with her? Of course not. She was a little whore anyways. No matter. Even if you did nothing to deserve his presence, he was there regardless. Always there. You got a few moments of relief in the daylight, but the smell clung to your clothes and even in your own pores. You were never truly alone. Even within the pure white walls of your sanctuary, he was there. Just outside the door. You can see him, and you can smell him. The men in white coats tell you that it's all in your head, that the guilt of your crimes caused you to have a psychiatric break. But you know that they are lying. You're too smart to fall for it. You never regretted what you did. You knew he was sent as a punishment for getting caught. That had to be it. You can see him outside the door now, just standing there like he does every night. But wait, this time it's different. You can see the doorknob is turning, and as the smell of putrefying skin and bone overwhelms you, he is there, next to you, watching you, killing you.